The beta for patch 1.1 is in a lot better place now, and that means it's time for our Byzantium guide. We'll be Iron Manning it, of course, because why not? Now, first of all, you'll likely know you can no longer release vassals in your core territory. So all of the land, so the strategy of giving out all of your land to avoid the disaster is no longer viable. Well, except it is, because while you can't give out core land to vassals, you can give it out to vassals. And since we start with Epirus as a vassal, we can give pretty much our entire country to Epirus, while releasing the few locations we don't have cores in as vassals. For example, in southern Greece or Bulgaria. If we gave out all of our Greek territory to those vassals, we'd be left with 3 locations. This little one here, Constantinople obviously, and Philadelphia. So if you sold one of those locations, for example, I like selling this one to the neighboring nation, Kandarids, that would let you get under the 2 provinces minimum you need to have to trigger the disaster. So if that's what you want to do, if you want to mimic the vassal strategy, you can do it that way. Here's an example I made earlier. No disaster for us. Instead of doing that, we're going to take a more active role. We are going to release some land, mainly land that we don't have cores in. For example, this Bulgarian territory here will release as a fiefdom, as well as the territory in southern Greece, which will also release as a fiefdom. And then we'll release a vassal, the historical vassal of Thessaly, in our uncored territory here. Then we'll just give them the other uncored lands in the area that we control, in the areas around where they are. There, we've given out all of our non-cored territory. Now, as you'll know, the main problem that Byzantium experiences are these 4 privileges, which essentially make it so you can't make any money. The consolidated corruption privileges. We also can't revoke these until we get our legitimacy up to 95. And if we look at our economy, you'll see we're making around 0 ducats from all of our estates, except for the peasantry, where we're making 0.6 because of these privileges. If we look at our economy, even if we max minting, we'll still be making a large deficit. One of the main costs we have is forts. So we're actually going to demolish a lot of the forts we control. We're only going to want to keep 2 forts. The one here in what is now Gallipoli, to block the access to Anatolia, and of course our fort in Constantinople. But even with all that done, we're very likely to go into debt. You may be tempted to max minting, and honestly, if that's what you want to do, go for it, but you're still not going to be likely to be able to avoid going into debt unless you don't actively push your cost of court, which is kind of what you want to do, because the faster we can get our legitimacy up via cost of court, the faster we can remove those privileges and actually start making money. The next thing to talk about is our military. Due to this privilege, the corruption of the elites, our army is very weak due to very low morale. We're going to be able to kind of compensate with that via our vassals. They'll be able to provide us with some soldiers, but really we want to do everything we can to buff our existing soldiers, and to do that we're going to hand out 2 privileges. The first one we're going to hand out is Primacy of the Nobility for the extra 5 discipline, and the second one is the Common Militias for that extra peasant levy size, levy combat efficiency, and that's basically all we can do because we're now at a legitimacy. It doesn't really matter doing this because we're going to lose a lot of legitimacy in the coming events that happen not long after the start of the game anyway. It's better to just spend it, I think. With that done, we're going to start building a spy network on the Ottomans. Our goal will be to eliminate them as fast as possible. We could no CB them, but I prefer getting a claim so that we can have a more leisurely war without dropping stability, which is already going to drop quite far just through events. This is our first negative event, the Turkish threat. This will drop our stability by 20%, but honestly we'll just have to roll with the punches. If you're very lucky, the coup attempt will trigger instead of the Byzantium court succession crisis. The coup is a lot easier to deal with. It only decreases your crown power, it only decreases the efficiency of your cabinet and adds cost to your court. And it has lots of events that increase stability and increase legitimacy. Plus, this disaster only lasts for 5 years and then it just disappears. So it's actually quite a nice disaster. What you're more likely to get is the Byzantium succession crisis, which is a pretty terrible disaster. A lot of the events for it are terrible. They're going to decrease your estate satisfaction, and the disaster itself decreases your estate satisfaction. One problem I've noticed a lot of people have with the disaster is that their estate satisfaction falls so low that they can no longer raise levies, because levies can only be raised based on the happiness of the estate. For example, if the peasant estate's happiness falls below 25%, they will no longer provide you with army or navy levies, and that's the same for the nobles. So I've seen a lot of people, they go into this disaster, They lose happiness due to the horrible events, and then they can't raise any armies because their happiness is too low. On the economic side of things, once your trade income comes online, I would recommend really just trying to push your economy to the limit. We start with very high inflation. It's tempting to max minting so we can get a high income, but I think it's better to try and bring that inflation down as fast as possible. After all, any attempt to expand our economy is kind of pointless at this point, because we won't make any money from locations due to not making any money through tax, and getting our inflation down will help us actually make money from locations in the future, because it'll cost less to expand those RGOs. For example, one of the locations you really want to expand your RGOs in is this gold mine. If you look at this gold mine, we're currently making 0 ducats from it, due to the fact that none of the estates pay any tax except for the peasants. And then the wealth share of the peasants is only 0.7 ducats, so we're making nothing essentially from it. So we want to avoid investing in our country currently and just saving up money for when we eventually reach a point where we can actually invest. So in that mind, money doesn't matter that much, since we can't use it, and even if we used it, it wouldn't benefit us. So we kind of just want to fix the country as much as possible while ignoring money almost. That's why I rush up for the cost of court, get our legitimacy as high as possible, as fast as possible, and kind of just not worry about making money in the short term. Making money comes later. Here's our next negative event. We can either spend a lot of money to try and repair Constantinopolis, or we can accept losing 10 legitimacy and 10 religious influence while decreasing the prosperity by 20%. Personally, I don't really think it's worth funding the repairs. I mean, it's only 10 legitimacy, right? And the financial hit is a lot worse than losing 10 legitimacy. So we're going to say, alas, there's nothing we can do. This will drop the prosperity of Constantinople by 20%. So do keep that in mind. Your prosperity likely is in the low area already, so it will go into the negative. The thing you probably want to do immediately after that is assign one of your cabinet ministers or cabinet seats to recover prosperity in Constantinople. Since negative prosperity is all around bad, you really want to get it back up to where it was as fast as possible. There goes our ruler. It's pretty inevitable. He has a modifier that makes it so he dies very quickly, and we end up in a regency. Since it's inevitable, I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it. It's just gonna happen. The only question is how long your ruler actually survives for. Our first parliament has become available. This is a bit of a toss-up. It could be lots of different things that come up here. If you're lucky, you'll get bolster government, which I would recommend applying. Even if the issue doesn't pass, every month that it's being debated will increase your legitimacy by 1 for that month. As we can see here, we're making our legitimacy increasing by 1.3 a month. Once we start the debate, it is now decreasing by 2.3 a month. And as I said, this takes into account even if it doesn't pass, which it may not do. And as our goal is to get our legitimacy as high as possible, as fast as possible, I would very much recommend it, unless there's a better option. Here's our succession crisis. Bid for the Byzantium crown. You'll select a random person in your court and make them the pretender. If you're lucky, this will be somebody very old, because the disaster can end the moment the guy dies. If the pretender dies or has left the court and our country isn't at war and not in a civil war, the disaster ends. Another way to end the disaster is to defeat the rebels in open battle. So I would recommend not doing anything to hold back the rebels. In a way, you want them to happen as fast as possible. The faster they revolt, the faster they can be defeated. Now in this patch, we now have access to the provoke rebels action. Once they reach 70% progress, you can actively just cause them to trigger whenever you feel like. And I would recommend doing so once their revolt gets high enough. If you're lucky, you'll get events like these during the disaster, the demands of the country. It gives you the option of getting a truce with the nation in question in exchange for money and legitimacy, or you can just say no, in which case you get legitimacy. If you're lucky, this event will trigger multiple times and you can just get lots of legitimacy very fast for cheap. I mean, if the Ottomans want to attack us, they can be my guest. They've got 5,000 levies plus 1,000 regulars. We have 10,000 levies plus 500 regulars plus our vassals. If they want to fight us, they can really just try, so no. In fact, if the Ottomans declared war on us, it would be a lot easier for us, as it means we wouldn't need to waste time creating a casus belli, and would just be able to attack them immediately. Another similar event is this foreign merchant privileges event. It gives you the option of making a deal with either Venice, Genoa, or both. Personally, I don't think the benefits of this event are very useful, mainly just a decrease to galley costs and shipbuilding speed. Personally, I prefer saying these leeches are up to no good, which gives us mercantile self-reliance, which increases our monthly legitimacy and gives a little trade efficiency. Sure, it upsets both of them, but I'm fine upsetting Genoans and Venetians. Here's one of those events I was talking about earlier. This gives us a choice between decreasing the happiness in a location and increasing the progress of the crown pretenders, or spending money to gain legitimacy and decreasing the increasing control and prosperity in these locations and increasing the crown pretenders' growth. Personally, I prefer to increase the crown pretenders' growth. We want them to progress as fast as possible, because the faster they progress, faster we can defeat them. While the 5 legitimacy is tempting, our legitimacy is actually quite high at the moment, around 80. We're getting close to the point where we can start revoking these privileges, so I'm not in a rush to get my legitimacy up, and I'd much rather end the disaster faster. The Age of the Renaissance has happened. I would recommend going for the admin focus, if only because of the religious war CB that can only be accessed in this by going admin in this age. It might be tempting to go the military side if you really just want a bigger military and more levies, but personally I think we'll have handled the disaster before we reach the point in the trio where we can gain access to the larger levy upgrades. There, we've reached above 95 legitimacy, so what we're going to do immediately is revoke this privilege. Corruption of the common people. It's going to cost us a bit of stability, but we got the bolster crown authority from the parliament issue before, so it's gonna help a little. We're gonna revoke it. Let's take a look. We're currently making 0.3 ducats from our peasantry. We are going to revoke the privilege, and as if like magic, we're now making 0.8 ducats from the peasantry, which, as you can imagine, is not a big increase. This is mainly due to the fact that this new patch makes it so that the amount of money the peasants have is a lot reduced. Now most of the money that is made by the nobles. For that reason, I would not recommend revoking the peasantry's privilege immediately like this. In the previous versions, the peasantry were your main money maker, so revoking this privilege fast was the best thing to do, but now it's not. Around this time, we have gained the ability to create a CB on the Ottomans. I would recommend going for a claim war, because it reduces the cost of taking land. On the question of which province to make the claim for, I would go for their capital. Our goal is to destroy the Ottomans completely if possible. When it comes to taxing your estates, try to make sure their estate satisfaction equilibrium remains above 25%, so that you can still call up the levies even though they're unhappy. In a way, their unhappiness benefits us because it increases the rate at which they'll support the rebellion. And the faster the rebellion happens, the faster the disaster ends. At this point, you'll also gain access to the Appease the Estates cabinet action because our estates are so unhappy. You can use this to pick an estate and just increase their satisfaction by 2.5%, which isn't a lot, but it's definitely nice. It also increases their happiness recovery rate. Unfortunately, due to the disaster, the estate satisfaction for your estate is likely on the low side, especially due to the fact that you've likely lost a lot of stability from revoking those privileges, which is why you might want to hold off on it. I'm doing it largely for science here, to show you the effects. Unlike in the previous patches, revoking those privileges on the peasantry doesn't immediately solve your economic problems like it does in the previous patches. In my opinion, it's generally worth holding off on doing so. Around this time, the rebellion has hit that 70% progress, so we can now trigger the rebellion just by asking them to. One thing you can do is you can see what territory is going to join the rebellion by clicking on them in the bar. One thing I would recommend doing is positioning your standing army on the fort here in Gallipoli to ensure that it won't flip. Usually if your army is located in a province or a location when a revolt is going to happen, that location will stay under your control. So we want the revolters to have no forts if we can. Now we're going to trigger the revolt, buffing the revolt progress up to more than 100%. Then if we wait a month, there the revolt is triggered and the civil war immediately ends, giving us a buff of legitimacy and stability. One thing you might want to do before you press this event is hand out some privileges which cost legitimacy, which you will then gain back by immediately pressing the event. For me, I'm going to grab free mobility of the common people. This allows them to migrate, increases peasant enfranchisement, pushes us towards free subjects, and allows commoners to expand RGOs. I'm also going to hand out treasury rights to the burghers, which increase our tax efficiency by a paltry 2, decreases bank loan interest by 1, and gives us a little push towards innovation. Since we racked up quite a few loans over the course of the events, that will help a little bit with paying off the interest, as well as giving us a little boost to our economy and a push towards innovation, which is always nice. Then we'll press the event, We'll immediately gain that legitimacy back, and now we can deal with the disaster. Because the revolters don't control any forts, it should honestly be very easy to deal with them. Just raising your levies, of course making sure that your peasants are happy enough to actually let you raise them. Then dealing with the revolters is simply a matter of going around and killing them. And there we go, the rebels are defeated. A very quick conflict. And that's our problems largely solved. Our economy still isn't great, mainly due to the fact the nobles, which control majority of the income, aren't paying any real tax, and our minting is still sky high to counter the costs, but we're definitely in a lot better situation than we were a little while ago. Around this time, our casus belli on the Ottomans has come online. Unfortunately, our stability is still a little bit over 50, so we'll need to wait about 2 months for it to drop below -50, and then we can declare war. So we're just going to wait a little bit. If you're unlucky, like me, you may experience a revolt by the nobles that you can't stop, but honestly, the nobles are pretty weak. As long as you make sure they don't get control of your fort, it should be pretty easy to deal with them. Now with the rebels dealt with, we can now declare war on the Ottoman. Depending on how your game has gone, the Ottoman can be of varying strength, but personally, I don't think they're going to be much of an issue, even if they're quite a bit stronger than you. What we're going to do is we're going to declare war, and now we're not going to attack them. Instead, what we want to do is we want them to siege us, essentially. The Ottomans are of course going to occupy all of our land in Anatolia. What we want is for them to come over and try and siege our provinces like Constantinople. We also don't want to block the Ottomans' army getting across, so make sure that your navy is not blocking the strait. Then, once the Ottomans siege Constantinople, their army will be trapped there. They will not be able to retreat. Depending on how strong you are, you may want to fight them, but if they're too strong, you don't have to. Instead, you can simply ignore them, leave them in Constantinople, and focus on sieging down their country. Since they are cut off in Constantinople, they will eventually run out of food and begin to starve, and it's unlikely they'll ever successfully take down the siege, allowing you largely free reign to do as you like with their country. And we're going to do just that. As you can see, the Ottomans have run out of food and they've now started to starve. When their army gets weak enough, we may just attack it ourselves and finish them off. In the meantime, we're just keeping them trapped in Constantinople. Remember, if you do feel like they're going to win the siege, which is honestly unlikely, you can attack and call up the defenders in the city, which is around 2,000 men, to help in the attack. For example, if we attack them now with our army of around 10,000, plus those 25,000 defenders, we should win, but we're not going to, because unless the siege is at risk of falling, there's no need for us to actually intervene in the siege. Now we're going to attack them. Make sure to put our best general we have into the attack. They've lost large amounts of their army, and when we hit them, we're also going to call up the soldiers in the castle to help with the attack. There we go, we've joined the battle. We're also going to out-order the garrison to sortie. It's not really going to be a close fight. The Ottomans are the Ottomans, but we're the Byzantians, and they're starving, largely decimated army simply isn't good enough to fight us. And since they're trapped in the location, they can't retreat across the strait, forcing them to pull back into our territory. You may also notice your vassal army's not really doing anything. That's simply because they view themselves as too weak to really get involved in the war. Once you stack wipe the Ottoman army, like we're going to try to do, unless they can escape across the strait to Gallipoli, that's something we hadn't taken into account. But no, they didn't. Oh, and look at that! At that precise moment, our terrible heir decided to die in a hunting accident, leading Michael, our actual good heir, to become our successor. Everything's going perfectly. Speaking of perfectly, there goes the Ottoman army. They now have no soldiers left. How horrible for them. Now we can siege down their country even more leisurely than we were doing already. There, if you're unlucky like me, this siege will literally of their capital will literally take 2 years. But either way, now you can decide what to do with them. It may be tempting to try and return your cores, but I think this mechanic is a little buggy, if you'll pardon the use of the language, because I don't think this will result in a full annexation, because it doesn't include these 2 locations here, because we don't have cores on them. But we can't give ourselves these lands because we're choosing to return cores in the area. So I would recommend just going with the standard full annexation. There's no real reason to tolerate the continued existence of the Turks. Take as much money as you can from them, which should be max. Also annex any vassals they have, if they do have any. For my Ottomans here, they managed to get a little vassal of this guy. We won't allow him to continue to exist. He'll be absorbed as well into the glory of Rome. And there we go. Ottomans are off the table. On the question of what to do with the land, obviously we don't have, on the land we don't have cores on, I would recommend immediately hand creating vassals. Vassals will make much better use of the land than we ever could, and of course they will pay us money. Do take into account some things are a little buggy. For example, this location we have cores in. We have 4 cores in, but because we don't have cores in 2 of the locations, we could actually release this as a vassal. So when releasing vassals, do take care that you aren't actually releasing core territory, unless you want to, of course. If you want to, you could just release all of it. I mean, who cares, right? Just release it. Put somebody with low skills in charge, because people with low skills are better off in running countries than hanging around in our court making nuisances of themselves. There, a liberated Ottoman Anatolia. Do be a little wary of coalitions, of course. The main country you want to be wary of is the Mamluks, because they're going to be your biggest rival going forward after the early game. Remember, if you have a parliamentary issue, one of the things you can always pick is request additional taxation, which will force the estates to actually pay you a fair amount of money. That sort of rapid taxation might be a good idea to help buff your economy quickly, so you can pay off the large amount of loans you may have accumulated. But that's very much on a case-by-case basis. All right, I think we'll leave it there. We're in a pretty good position now. We've gained a lot of vassals in Anatolia. The Ottomans are gone. There's only really the smaller Turkic tribes in the area who aren't really a threat to us. They're all pretty weak compared to us. Our economy is still pretty poor. That's mainly due to the large amount of debts we have, and of course the nobles not paying any tax. It's why, if you do this, I would recommend prioritizing revoking the consolidated corruption of the elites more over than anything else. I revoked the 2 other privileges to show that this is not the way to do it. In the previous versions, revoking the commoner's privilege was the way to go, but now commoners barely pay you any money when compared to nobles. So I would recommend saving up your stability and revoking this privilege primarily. It's also the privilege that weakens your army the most, and therefore makes it #1 priority. You can ignore the privileges for the other factions. For example, the corruption of the clergy doesn't really matter, because you shouldn't even be taxing them anyway, because they're better to not tax, because they help you research faster. So I would avoid taxing the clergy at all. So you can leave them with that privilege for a long time if you want to. All right, this is the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Do let me know what you thought. Will you be vassal maxing by handing out your land to vassals, like in the previous version? Or will you be tackling the disaster head on in this current version? Either way, thank you for watching, and see you next time.